flashing at me. I gotta let it finish. You're welcome.
Should we just talk over it?
This is for the people.
This is for the.
What's going on, Ticker Nation? Welcome,
this is
everybody.
Very Ticker Nation-y.
It is.
A rock and roll Ticker Nation.
What are we calling this?
Well, it's Ticker Talk, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Welcome to Ticker Talk.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Max.
And Kate here in separate studios, but coming together to talk about a workout that we have coming up this week.
Yeah, it's Saturday, June 26, 2021 on the calendar. We're going to kind of go over this as like a common mistakes made when performing ticker training and when it's supposed to be like zone 2/3. Okay. So
zone 2-3. So let's talk about what zone 2-3 is. Most people have had, most of our Ticker Nation has had a metabolic test and has the specific heart rate that puts them in zone 2-3.
Yep.
If you haven't had a metabolic test, an easy way to figure out your zone 2-3 is to take 180 minus your age. Then to make sure that that is a zone 2 effort at that heart rate, make sure that you can breathe easy out of your nose, hold a conversation. The work should feel easy to repeat and be sustainable over hours at a time.
Correct. I always kind of use the example, if you don't have a heart rate monitor, just utilize nasal breathing. But, you know, every time we do that in class, you see that person over there.
Well, we're going to probably see an example of that when you bring up your heart rate chart, and we'll talk about how well you were breathing.
Exactly. So,
okay. So our workout for Saturday is, you're going to bring it up. So the reason we wanted to talk about this particular workout is it's a long endurance effort that has dynamic Olympic movements. It has opportunities to recover. So we've got hang power clean, shoulder to overhead, not an Olympic movement, but a press. Hang power clean's a pull, but we also have bike row ski and we have burpees. Right. So to keep all of those things going for an hour in zone 2-3, there's a whole lot going on there. So when you wrote this workout, what was your intent? Yeah,
my intent was to work for 50 minutes at my MAF or at my zone 2 and just touch a little zone 3. I figured by the end of it. Intention was to find a weight that you could easily have aerobic contractions throughout and make true metabolic adaptations, meaning you're going to pull fat during this workout and you're going to improve your ability to do that. So lots of aerobic contractions.
So if I look at that, you added, a hang power clean, which is a pretty explosive movement with weight, and then the bike to recover, and then the shoulder to overhead and the row to recover, and then the burpees, which is another explosive movement. So we've got exploding.
So so we've got pull, right? We've got pull in this. We've got bending in this with the hang power clean. We've got bending and pushing in the burpee, and then pulling in the row, pushing on the bike, pulling on the ski, just all sorts of opportunity to utilize different muscle groups and to improve aerobic contractions throughout this thing.
Right. So I look at this, if I didn't have a heart rate training zone label at the bottom, which you did, you should be performed at a weight that does not pull you out of zone 3. I also need to, something important to say about this is it's 50 minutes.
Correct.
That's a long time to be doing all of these rounds and reps. What did you expect? How many rounds would you expect? What's your time domain if done right? When I'm programming, I think, 10 hang power cleans are going to take 15 seconds or 30 seconds. Where were you thinking people would pace this, and what is a score you expect to see?
So this should be pretty much 10 minutes around, which was the time domain that I was hitting.
Okay.
And that was with keeping a very casual pace on the bike, the ski, and the row. So, pace on those was around 50 RPMs on the bike, around 700 calories on the ski and the rower. So, yeah,
and what heart rate is your zone 2-3?
125 to 130.
Okay.
So the top of zone 3 would be like 150.
Okay.
So I was a well-performed workout for me on this would have been, my average was about 130 no, I would have not seen any 150.
Okay.
Okay. So I chose because I wanted to kind of give an example here of common mistakes. I put 115 pounds on the bar because I can easily do all of that unbroken with
Because it's only 10 and 10. It's 10
correct.
hang power cleans and 10 shoulder to overhead.
So the idea here was to kind of give an example of pretty aerobic session for me, but not to the point where we would have made some major improvements in my zone 2 or 3, right? Because I spent zero time in zone 2 and 3.
Right. So
So
let's look at this chart a little bit. And so you can see every round where you start out, and it starts out with hang power cleans and then the bike and then the shoulder to overhead and then the row. And you can see heart rate gets up in that first round to 145 beats and sits there.
in general on this, if I were to have maintained what I did in the first round,
Mm-hmm.
that would have been a great workout.
Absolutely.
And probably this is actually, let's see. Yeah, there's the end of the first round. Got it?
Yep.
So here's the start. Here's the end of round 1.
Okay.
Okay. So if it would have looked like 3 nice little rises and runs like this, that would have been a beautiful, well executed workout. Even this whole first round is a nice, but you can see as the trend goes up, round 2, not quite as nice. I already was hitting 160. I was
Mm-hmm.
already hitting 160,
Mm-hmm.
and then all of a sudden it just keeps creeping up on me. Recovery doesn't come as far. That's when a PNOE or a metabolic analysis to have an idea. You'll know you're not doing good MAF training or good zone 2-3 work when you're not getting to the same recovery as when you started.
So
Yeah.
when I saw this chart, I told you, I said this was not sustainable work. And your response was, yes, it was.
Yeah. So
This is the spoiler alert. This probably felt like it was. Now, I mean, this was an hour.
yep.
Now, your the essence of your athletic prowess, like who you are as an athlete, made this sustainable for an hour. And you could have probably sustained this for, another hour. But if I look at it, and this is what I pointed out, when you started recovering down to not even where you were aerobic, you didn't even
Right.
recover to your MAF anymore.
Right.
I would say this was unsustainable work.
Yeah. I would agree with that, Kate. But I would also look at this as the goal was 50 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
right? So there's a couple arguments in the world that as long as it's repeatable, it's aerobic. And I'm not going to argue with
repeating 10 minutes per round.
correct. So I 100% repeated this. Pace was the same on the rower, repetitions, everything were the same.
Mm-hmm.
But so was this aerobic work? Technically, yes. Technically, I never at one point had a higher RER than 0.95 probably. Got it? But this is not how you improve your aerobic capacity.
You got really good at spending 50 minutes doing work. You didn't
this is
to get better at it. You didn't absorb that training to get better at doing those things at a lower heart rate because
correct.
you didn't actually do them.
Correct. All I did was just use what I got. I didn't train today. I played.
Right.
And it felt good. Like, so here's another problem with a couple measurements. One, I just kind of talked about the problem with just using repeatability, right? Mm-hmm. I repeated it. So, yep. Was it aerobic? Yep. Those are two things that are happening in this. The other one that a lot of people use is rate of perceived exertion. Mm-hmm. If you were to ask me, how hard was that, Max, or did this wear you out? I would say my rate of perceived exertion on this was a 5 or a 6.
Right.
Got it. So the perception of what this felt was not difficult to me. Got it.
If you think about what the workout was, you had 20 cals on a bike, a row, and a ski.
Yep. So there's plenty of time to recover.
It was only 10 of everything on the opposite side of it. And right. So it was one of those that brought your heart rate up. You did come back down, brought your heart rate up. Now, what I want to ask, and we can look at this like, okay, so this was a really fun workout.
Yep.
You worked for an hour, you got training in, time under tension, more or less, right? You didn't make any metabolic adaptations except, working for an hour, increased capacity. Now, why didn't you make changes on the second round when you saw that your heart rate was being pulled up higher than you wanted to be and that you knew the intention of the workout was made to be?
Yeah, well, part of it was that I wanted to create this video to talk about it, right? So that was part of it. And then just the typical things like, I don't know, I didn't feel like stopping. I didn't feel like getting the 25 out. All the, I was enjoying the workout.
Right.
So that would be why I didn't do it. Is that a good excuse? No. Like
Were you watching your heart rate while you were
oh
training?
yeah,
Did you
absolutely.
notice what was happening?
Oh, absolutely. And I can feel it at the end of each set. Like if this was only 5 hang power cleans and 5 push press, average heart rate would have been 10 beats lower.
Right.
You can feel that last little bit of strain in those last 3 or 4 reps on each thing, even the burpees. I was like, oh, here it is. I'm getting pulled out of that easy, smooth work.
Right.
So
Even though that felt easy and smooth to you.
yes,
I mean, you had a recent test where you said the same thing. You're like, I didn't even start breathing, you know, out
correct.
of my mouth until 160 beats. This shows that, but, and then you could argue like, wow, I must be efficient up to 160 beats, which I could argue because that's where you stop, right? You
Right.
stop in the 160s in there. But then when you don't recover, then it's not.
Correct.
Another easy way to figure out when you had said, it's aerobic work, or you're doing really good zone 2 work, which is where you're using oxygen super efficiently and then pulling fat as fuel. When you stop moving, if your body looks at it as sustainable in terms of like an all-day effort, your heart rate will drop right back down to that same
Correct.
point, probably all the way to recovery. Interestingly enough for you, even in your first set, I mean, you were moving though, you were moving on a rower, you only dropped to what, 117 beats. You
Yeah.
only ever recovered to 120. So if
Yep.
you had known your zone 2 was sitting at 125,
Right. So this
that
is
was, you were playing with fire.
correct. I knew it right from the start. This would have been a great conversation when we first started, ticker training at CrossFit Tree Town, and
Yeah.
we'd say to people like, hey, you're working too hard. It doesn't feel hard. And I would have said that about this. This doesn't feel hard. Well, but
Right.
my heart and my RERs were saying a different thing. Got it.
Right. Just
So
because you can do all of that effort at that pace for an hour doesn't mean that you necessarily should if you're trying to make yourself better aerobically and making those things aerobic, which will beg a question. Why bother then? Why bother making this a 2-3? Why not make it a 3-4? Why not just let everybody have at it in this manner,
yeah,
to train for an hour?
yeah, great question, right, Kate? And I mean, you're kind of saying it in a rhetorical question, I think, but
Right.
why not? Because if we're trying to you know, make doing these movements easier over time, you have to you have to do lots of push press easy over time. You have to do lots of hang power cleans easy over time. This is a great way to kind of put this, for bike racers, right? They have to do thousands and thousands and thousands, millions of contractions on a bike. If you think about like how many times you're pushing down on the pedals, pulling up on the pedals, and you're doing, the athletes are doing that at zone 2, 3 work. Why do they do that? Because they need to build such a monstrous. So what happens, right? Just because they're doing zone 2 work, let's just say for a professional cyclist or any cyclist, when they first start doing zone 2 work, they can only push 100 watts.
Yep.
Well, then all of a sudden they do millions of contractions on a bike at zone 2, and now all of a sudden they can push, 180 watts at that same effort.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? That means they're just going to get to the finish line that much faster with the same amount of work. But they couldn't just hack and start pushing the pedals harder, because now they're going to train a different energy system while they're building strength and musculature.
Well, the game becomes how skilled, how fast, how heavy can you work in zone 2. So you can pick a zone 2 where you're burning fat. And right now it may be, you're going to have to do a lighter weight, or you're going to have to slow yourself down so that you are recovering. And
Correct.
you're going to do that over and over and over again. The thing is I look at this chart and I think about, you mentioned when we first started at Tree Town and looking at these kind of things, I'm like, okay, so you could, and I'm sure like, could you do this again today? Could you go do and repeat this exact thing?
Absolutely.
Right. So then I'm like, cool, that's what you're capable of. Now, if you could make all this easy so
Right.
that by training, obviously that's why we train it. Then what are you capable of if we retest this?
Right. So wouldn't it be awesome if I had 115 pounds in the bar, but I would use this as kind of my medium right here, right? This 160. What if all of this went up and down and all around 140?
Right.
Right? So if this whole thing just shifted down.
Or even you hit 160 because the weighted movements stressed you out, but you were able to recover down to 120 in that same time domain.
Sure. That's a great, without changing my pace.
Because your metabolic flexibility was such that once you started using the carbohydrates, which we know you're doing, and breathing out that CO2, you
Mm-hmm.
were not flexible enough to recover all the way back down to use oxygen
Right.
only while sitting on a row ski bike.
Right.
So you said that there's two different ways to do this. Three. One, you could just go repeat this again and again and again until you got better. That's probably going to take the most amount of time,
Agreed.
right? Like eventually your body would adapt,
I'll
except
get
we have a
stronger.
way, right? We have a way to see exactly what you should do instead to make this better.
Right.
So the other option is, and you had mentioned you want to redo this workout with lighter weight on the bar.
Yep.
Same workout.
Yep. My guess to get the right adaptation on this is probably going to be 75 pounds. I'd wish it was 95, but that's wishful thinking. I think to get this thing a nice flat graph, which is what the goal is on something like this,
Yep.
with just, very small bumps, 75 pounds is probably very capable. And I'm
For you, it was the weight that, I mean, we can see it.
absolutely
It was the weight that pulled you up and out. Now, could you go redo this at that same 115 and slow down?
no,
No. Okay.
nope.
So that, I
That was
mean, that's
hard.
good to know. I mean, that's something you know about yourself.
Yeah,
Um,
well, that's the kind of one of the lessons that I'm trying to teach people here too. Like that pace on the bike and on the row and the ski for me is already like, um, it, if I go too much slower, I might as well not be doing anything. Got it.
yeah.
There's not enough movement anymore. It's just turns into me sitting and resting.
And
So
that's frustrating. And then at that point, you really feel like, you weren't getting anything out of it. So
then all of a
for
sudden it just turns into reps of hang power cleans and push press with minute rest. Do you know what I mean?
Which was my next point, is training this to become better. Like, let's look at this as a baseline. Next week you want to do something else because you do want to get better at these movements across,
Right.
a big time domain. What is another way? Like, what do you have planned in progressing this? Because our programming is very progressive. Obviously, this is a test and you found,
Yeah.
okay, I have work.
Yep. So
How,
strength work, both in the push and the pull.
mhm.
Um, probably some EMOMs of hang power cleans, some building to heavy sets of 7 or 8 on the push press. Things like that will help. Just getting stronger overall, and then some more and better quality zone 2 work of all sorts, of all manners. But lots of, for me, I need lots of push work at an aerobic pace.
Right. And it could be anything for anybody, right? It could have
Correct.
been the pull, the ski and the row and the power cleans that were pulling people out of zone. If I think about aerobic contractions across any domain, you talked about biking, which is a monostructural activity, but then we think about, okay, we're CrossFitters. How are we going to get better at, hang power cleans, push press, burpees? It could be, kettlebell swings, deadlifts. It could be toes to bar. It could
Right.
be box jumps. Practicing all those in a zone 2 aerobic fashion would also help this, even though it is
Absolutely.
inherently obvious.
Right.
Now, what would have happened if, while doing this workout, you noticed that you could do one round in 10 minutes, and you noticed at the end of 10 minutes when it was time to get back on, it was at the bike first,
Mhm.
that your heart rate was over 140? What if you gave yourself a minute rest? And so every round took 11 minutes. Would that have changed things?
Yes, it would have helped. Absolutely. Um, but still, for me, that weight on the bar for the push is too much for me to be able to come back from. So
You don't think your second round, if you would have added a minute rest, would have looked like your first round?
no, not quite. It would have helped, Kate. It
Right.
definitely would have helped. And as a coach, that would have been a great way to, if somebody didn't want to take the weight on the bar, like let's say somebody shows up and says, I just want to push a little heavier weight. Okay, well, that's a great, I understand. I respect that. Let's let them have that for the day, but let's just add a minute rest. So overall, it's not as stressful as a situation. That's a great one, Kate. So maybe that's what I'll do tomorrow. Today, I'm going to take on this workout again. I want to show maybe 3 ways to attack this. And that'd be a third one. So one, I'm going to just go at 75 pounds, and then I'm going to add a minute rest at the end of each round. Let's see which one has a better effect. So
And
we'll
that's
give that a
individual
go.
for every athlete, but that is kind of an idea of why we make our training count.
It's great.
So from here, I guess stay tuned. We should check back in after you do that, and then
hopefully everybody got a little bit out of this. Just like I
this
try
is
to
the workout
share.
that's coming up this week. So
Yep.
everybody else, you can try this.
Yep.
If not on Saturday, pick a day and do it and see what happens.
Yeah.
Challenge
So and just to kind of give people a little bit of guidance, like you need to have a good grip for this to be able to go heavier. You need to be really strong on your overhead position where it doesn't stress you out, where literally you could probably, I don't know, strict press 115 10 times. You know what I mean? Like and that's a very, like, I don't think I can do that now. So it needs to be a weight that you don't have to like overreach for it. It needs to be smooth.
Yeah. All right, we'll check back in. We will post another video soon. Leave comments to us, get a hold of us on all the social medias, tickertrain@gmail.com. Give us your thoughts,
All right.
questions.
See you next time. Thanks, Kate.
Bye.